Online dating seems harmless, a fun way to meet new people, until one swipe leads you straight into a nightmare. From unsettling coincidences to encounters with real-life psychopaths lurking behind charming profiles, these terrifying Tinder stories will make you question just how much you really know about the person sitting across from you. Are you ready? Let's begin. Story number 1. Echo of the Past. Back in the spring of 2023, I was living in a cramped Brooklyn apartment with my best friend in the entire world. We each moved to New York City around the same time, two country girls feeling way out of our depth in the big city, and struck up an instant connection once we heard each other's accents in a coffee shop. She grew up in Kentucky, while I was literally just over the state line in West Virginia. We each had a very similar rural upbringing. On top of that, we had a similar sense of humor, similar tastes, and we just clicked. Yet, there was one major difference between us. Kayla had been sad to leave her little town behind, sad to leave her family, sad to leave her friends. The big city was calling her, but she still missed home. Me? I didn't miss home one bit. My family was about as messed up as they come, but it wasn't really their fault, I guess. They were responsible for their actions, but we suffered a family tragedy when I was a kid, and it really took its toll. Either way, meeting Kayla was an absolute blessing. As much as we enjoyed each other's company, we started pining for some more masculine company, if you catch my drift. And since talking to strangers in New York City is the fastest way to end up bound and gagged in someone's basement, we decided to try dating apps. Honestly, I found Tinder to be a little overwhelming, but my roommate had much more luck. So it was no surprise that she landed a very promising looking guy before I did. He was handsome, well-spoken, and also from the South, but he said he moved around a lot as a child, so he didn't consider himself from any one particular place. All in all, he sounded like a nice guy. After a few dates, my roommate brought him back to our apartment on a night when I happened to be awake. I was excited to meet him, but even more excited for my roommate to start spending nights at his place too, since having the whole apartment to myself in New York City was a luxury few got to enjoy. Anyway, it was a Friday night. I was sitting on the couch, watching Netflix and demolishing some Pepperidge Farm cookies, when I heard my roommate's key in the door. She walked in with her date, we made some introductions, and a casual but friendly conversation began. Only, the more we talked, the more I realized there was something oddly familiar about my roommate's Tinder date. Unfortunately, this is where my story needs to take a little tangent. See, my 10-year-old brother was murdered, and his killer was someone our whole family knew. I was just 6 years old when Mom and Dad took me to stay with my grandpa. They told me it would just be for one night, and 3 days later, they finally showed up again to tell me that Ryan wouldn't be coming home. He had gone to live in heaven with Grandma. I had already suffered through the loss of my grandmother, but at that age, death was still a very abstract concept to me. I didn't grasp the permanence of it, or even what it really meant. It sucked that I couldn't see her anymore, but at the same time, it just felt like she and Ryan were in the next room over, not gone, just not visible. I was sad about it, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it really affected me until much later on when I actually learned about the circumstances surrounding Ryan's death. I don't remember exactly when I learned about it, but I know it made me really angry and sad to think that the reason I couldn't see Ryan anymore was because someone had hurt him. It made it even worse that the person who hurt him was supposed to be one of his friends. I knew the kid. I saw him and my brother hanging out together on several occasions. So, when somebody mentioned that it was Jason who killed Ryan, I became fixated on him, wondering how such a gangly mess of stick-thin limbs and scruffy dark hair could be capable of causing my family such pain. I remember his eyes too. They were so dark brown that they looked more inky black than anything else, and it was those eyes that featured heavily in my nightmares for a long time, but not until I actually found out how and why he killed my brother. According to Jason's confession, he and Ryan had been playing by some train tracks one afternoon. Jason had found an old railroad fish plate, obviously tossed on the side of the tracks by some careless engineer. The thing must have weighed about 20 pounds, but all Jason said was that it felt really heavy in his hand. He and Ryan then walked down the train tracks a little way until Ryan stopped to tie his laces. Jason said he just stared at the top of Ryan's head for a second and started to wonder what it would sound like if he hit him with the fish plate. The curiosity slithered through him, overwhelming every rational instinct. So, he swung. The sound was sickening. A dull, wet crunch. Ryan collapsed. His body was convulsing violently, but he was still alive. Jason knew he would get in trouble for what he did, so he decided to try and hide it. He bashed Ryan's head with the iron fish plate until he stopped moving. When confronted by the cops, Jason said that all the other wounds on Ryan's body were the result of him being dragged to the shallow grave that he dug for him. Ryan was dragged for no more than 100 yards, but somehow, during the course of that short journey, an attempt to cut Ryan's tongue out had been made on his dead body. Fingers were missing, as they had been ripped off at the joint, and many parts of his body had been catastrophically damaged, as if they had been repeatedly smashed. In the end, Jason was sent away to juvie in some other state. Since he was so young when he killed my brother, the federal government gave him a brand new identity at age 18, so he could go out into the world as quite literally a different person. Which brings me back to my chance meeting with my roommate's Tinder date. Because as good-looking as he was, something about the color of his eyes and the way he carried himself brought back some seriously horrible memories. His reluctance to talk about his past, the way he dodged questions about family. And then, when I mentioned I was from West Virginia, his whole body went still. Our eyes locked, and I saw it. The recognition, the guilt, the horror that mirrored my own. "Jason," I whispered. The word fell from my lips before I could stop it. The moment stretched, taut as a wire. His pupils dilated, swallowing the brown of his irises until his eyes were nearly black. Then, without another word, he stood up. "I should go," he muttered. Kayla was confused. "Wait, what? Who's Jason? Where are you going?" I didn't answer her. I barely heard her. I was frozen in my seat, staring at the nightmare from my childhood-made flesh. He was taller now, broader. His hair was neater. But those eyes, the ones that once haunted my dreams, were the same. Somehow, I found my voice. "Don't come back." He left, the door shut, and just like that, he was gone. I told Kayla everything that night, every detail, every horror. She listened, she believed me, and she stayed by my side in the days that followed, even as I spiraled, even as the weight of that chance encounter crushed down on me. What are the odds? Of all the people, in all the cities, in all the world, he walked into my home. I used to think the universe was indifferent. Now, I'm not so sure. Story number 2, The Collector. I don't usually post on forums like this, but I need to get this off my chest. It happened 4 years ago, but I still think about it more often than I'd like to admit. I don't know if I was in real danger that night or if my imagination ran wild, but either way, I've never used Tinder since. This happened when I was 23. I was living in a mid-sized city, working my first real job out of college. I wasn't looking for anything serious, just someone to hang out with, grab drinks, maybe have fun with if there was chemistry. I wasn't new to Tinder. I'd been on a few dates before, some awkward, some fine, none remarkable, until this one. His name was Daniel. His profile was pretty normal, maybe a little too normal. 4 pictures, one of him hiking, one in a suit at what looked like a wedding, one with a dog, and one candidly laughing with friends. His bio just said, "Let's skip the small talk and tell each other our strangest childhood memories." Corny, sure, but different enough to catch my interest. We talked for a few days. He was funny, easy to talk to. He never asked anything weird or creepy, just fun, lighthearted conversation. I actually wanted to meet him, which wasn't common for me with Tinder dates. We set a date for Friday. I met him at a quiet bar downtown. It was small, the kind of place with dim lighting and jazz playing softly in the background. When I walked in, I spotted him immediately. He looked just like his pictures, Tall, dark hair, clean-shaven, well-dressed, but casual. He smiled when he saw me. "Lila?" I nodded, and we hugged briefly before sitting down. From the start, everything felt normal. I know that's not what you're expecting to hear, but that's what made everything so much worse in hindsight. There were no red flags, no weird vibes, just a fun date. We talked for over an hour, laughing, sipping on cocktails. He was charming, but not in a fake way. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. Then, somewhere around my second drink, he said, "Hey, I don't live too far from here. I have an amazing whiskey collection if you want to check it out." I hesitated. I wasn't that drunk, and I wasn't naive, but I also didn't get any bad vibes from him. I actually liked him, and I was curious. "Sure," I said. His apartment was about a 10-minute walk away. It was in a nice building, one of those older, renovated ones with exposed brick walls and big windows. When we walked in, I immediately noticed how neat everything was. Almost too neat. His furniture was minimal but expensive looking. No clutter, no dishes in the sink. Everything was perfectly in place. "You live alone?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, locking the door behind us. "I like my space." He walked over to a sleek glass cabinet and opened it, revealing rows of whiskey bottles. He poured me a glass, and we sat on the couch, continuing our conversation. I don't know when I started to feel uneasy. It was subtle at first. Maybe it was the way he watched me. Not in a creepy way, just too intently, like he was studying me. Or maybe it was the fact that his apartment felt too perfect, like no one actually lived there. There were no personal touches, no family photos, no signs of a life beyond this carefully curated space. I sipped my drink and glanced around, trying to shake the feeling. That's when I noticed the door. It was down a short hallway, slightly ajar. It looked like a bedroom, but I couldn't see inside. Daniel followed my gaze. "Want the tour?" I hesitated. Something in my gut told me to say no, but I nodded anyway. He led me through the apartment, kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, all normal. Then he gestured to the last door. He pushed it open, and I stepped inside. It looked like an office, a desk, bookshelf, leather chair. But then I saw the photos. At first I thought it was just an art thing, a collection. The walls were lined with framed photographs, but then I looked closer. Every photo was of a woman, not celebrities, not models, just regular women, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. "Wow," I murmured, forcing my voice to stay even. "You're into photography?" "Sort of," he said. I forced a laugh and asked, "Who are these people?" "Just people I've met." He studied me, like he was waiting to see my reaction. Something about the arrangement nagged at me. The photos were meticulously placed, evenly spaced, framed in identical black borders. Then I noticed the last frame. It was empty, waiting. I swallowed hard, my pulse hammering in my ears. "You okay?" he asked casually. "Yeah," I said too quickly. "I actually need to head home. It's getting late." His eyes flickered, but he only nodded. "Of course." I grabbed my bag and moved toward the door, my fingers already wrapping around my phone in my pocket. But before I reached the hallway, something made me pause. A familiar face. Not someone I knew, but someone I had seen before. 2 weeks ago, a girl had gone missing in our city. 20-some years old, brown hair, bright blue eyes. Her photo had been all over the news. And then I noticed something even worse. Each of the framed women had something in common, something I hadn't picked up on until now. They all looked normal at first glance, but when I focused on their eyes, a different story emerged. Fear. A flicker of something forced. A tightness around their mouths. The unmistakable stiffness of someone who had been told to smile for the camera. I looked at Daniel. He was still smiling, and then, slowly, his eyes flickered toward the empty frame, like he was waiting. I don't remember if he said anything as I bolted out the door, down the hallway, out into the night. I just remember shaking so badly I could barely type as I ordered an Uber from 3 blocks away. I never called the police. I should have, I know that. But I was terrified. What if they didn't believe me? What if it really was just a weird hobby? There was no proof he had done anything. No crime in having creepy photos in your home. I couldn't sleep for a month after that. Change my number. But sometimes, even now, I get the feeling someone's watching me. And I wonder if he ever filled that empty frame.